Hello, everybody, and welcome to Budget 2021, Reviving the Growth Engines. And this is a virtual roundtable discussion where we've got some of the top experts in the auto industry are going to be outlining what they are hoping to hear from the budget, maybe some of the things they're hoping they will not hear, and also an assessment of where things overall stand. So I'm Vikram Chandra, founder of Editorji, and we have a fantastic panel of thought leaders with us. What is it that the auto industry really needs to recover from the economic shock that they have seen? A boost is required, but what is this boost going to need? And what is it that they realistically think the finance minister could provide? Which of the initiatives are going to be most crucial? So we have a fantastic panel of experts joining us. Very pleased to welcome and to introduce Shashank Srivastava, Executive Director at Maruti Suzuki. We have Balbir Singh Dhillon, the head at Audi India, and Satyakam Arya, Managing Director and CEO at Daimler India Commercial Vehicles. Thank you all so much, gentlemen, for joining us. Before I dive into the budget itself, right, and what we are expecting in the budget, just wanted to get your sense of the state of play right now. I mean, like, how bad has it been? Are things getting any better? Who wants to go first? Satyakam, I guess it's been particularly challenging in commercial vehicles. So why don't I get you to start?
Sure. Thank you, Vikram. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. Well, it has been quite challenging even before COVID came. We operate in the medium and heavy commercial vehicle space, and this segment was dramatically affected way back in 2019 itself. The reasons that time were the implementation of the axle load norms, which simply meant that each truck could carry 25% extra load, and not the new trucks which are sold, but the trucks which were already on the road since years. That definitely led to the slowdown in the industry, and 2019 finished 35% below 2018. And then, of course, came COVID, due to which we have seen a massive contraction in demand. By the time December ended, the industry contracted by another 60% on top of the contraction we saw in 2019. So it has been quite challenging in the last 2 years, and we're really hoping that with the budget and with the adequate push from the government, we can hope for a quick recovery of demand.
Yeah, of course, that does presuppose that there will be a push. I'm sure there will be, but I do think that health warning is required. That assumes that there is going to be a push. I'm sure the finance minister is listening to this and listening to your views. So let's see. Budget's probably printed by now, but still. Shashank, let me just turn to you because, Maruti, Suzuki out there, so many millions of people buying cars. How's this year been, and how's the next year looking to you right now? Have things started to bounce back? Are people buying cars again?
Yeah, so it's been a sort of very good last quarter for us. In fact, today we released the Q3 results, and we saw some healthy growth on the top line as well as bottom line. But, similar to what the previous panelist Satyakam said, actually, last year for auto industry, the passenger vehicles was a negative, almost 18%. And the first quarter this year was a disaster in the sense that April was zero sale. That was the first time ever in the Indian auto industry that you had zero sales in a month. Q1 was like a minus 80 for the industry. H1 was down about 34-35%. But the recovery started sometime in Q2 onwards, and month on month, we have seen a good recovery. Monsoons have been pretty good. Rabi crop was the record last year. Kharif sowing has been pretty good. Monsoons are 9% up, and even I'm told Rabi crop sowing this time is also pretty good, about 3% up. So the rural bounce back started, and in Q3 the urban also we saw a good bounce back, with the result that we get some sort of a misleading scenario where people think that since there has been a month-on-month increase, Q3 has been good, so the industry is back to normal. It's not. So if you compare April, December for this year with the previous year, we're still 33% off those highs. So the year 18-19 was actually the benchmark year where we had 3.4 million car sales in the industry. And this year we are looking at an ending with about 2.62 to 2.65, assuming Q4 goes well. And of course, next year, as you asked, next year in growth terms could be good because, this base effect for this year has been pretty low. And I can tell you, we joke around that we will definitely grow in April because last April was zero. So whatever we do in April, we will show growth. And for that, I'm completely confident. But the auto sales depends not only on the state of the economy. There's a very high correlation between the GDP per capita growth and the auto industry growth. But it depends also on the sentiment, because in economic terms, it's a discretionary purchase. And the sentiment on the COVID is though a little better, and I think that's also giving a positive, sort of feeling. But it could go anyway. So we do believe that there is a lot of things which need to be done for the industry to get back to the levels which we saw 2 years back. So in fact, if you look at the April-December this year, it's the lowest in the last 10 years actually. So a lot of things have to be repaired. Fortunately, industry and the Indian customer has shown great resilience, and they're much better than what we expected actually. And our supply chain, which was ruptured in the first quarter, has sort of bounced back. Some great work done by our vendors, our dealers. So I'm quite hopeful for a good year next year, but it all depends on the economic growth and also on the sentiment going forward.
Right, important point you're making out there, that even if you think things are recovering, it's going to take some time to get back to where we were even just a couple of years ago. Forget about what way we would have been if COVID had not actually happened. But let me turn to you, because there's a certain perception, right or wrong, that all of this is very well, but the rich have only got richer and are actually doing quite well despite COVID. And as a result of that, the sort of people who are buying Audis are probably not concerned too much about what's happening in the broader economy. So how are you doing? Are your sales rocking or no? You're also well off the highs?
So first of all, good evening, Vikram, and thanks for inviting, and good wishes to you and the panelists and all the viewers for a good 2021 and a healthy one. That is most important. I think I'm not going to repeat what has already been said by the panelists. We all have gone through one of the toughest times in our professional lives. Even luxury segment has actually plummeted to almost 10 years back. We have degrown in 2019 and we have degrown in 2020 as well. So we are almost at the lowest points. Very important to mention is that the luxury segment actually contributes to only about 1% of the overall automotive industry, while it contributes to almost 10% of the revenues which government generates. But this has not grown for last many years, primarily because of very high taxations. The taxation, the duty structure, and the registration costs are extremely high, and they have only been going higher and higher for past many years, leaving the industry to almost like 1% or even below in 2020. But coming back to your question, that whether the luxury customers have been impacted, of course they are. You have to understand that most of our buyers do come from business community, and most of the businesses were impacted. Not all of them, because some sunshine industries are also doing well, but most of the businesses have not been doing well. So we are also waiting for the businesses to come back on track. But yes, for last quarter, the quarter is starting October, November, December. Month after month, the sales have been growing. In fact, for us, December was the best month of 2020. But you have to also understand that this has been on the back of low performance of the whole industry in 2019, followed by 2020. Many months we had very less number of sales. So it is growing, but at a low base. We need to really work hard, and also need a push from government to take the industry to a higher levels. So it is not easy, but I'm sure it is. At least the outlook is positive. It is on an upper trail, I would say, and I hope it continues to be like that.
So let me turn then to the question of what we are actually expecting in the budget. And would you be keeping your eye more on steps that will be taken to revive the economy in general and to get the economy up and running again? Or would you be hoping for something specific for the auto sector? Shashank, do you want to go first this time? Which of the two would you be hoping?
So actually both of it, because as I said, the auto industry is very closely correlated with economic GDP per capita growth. In fact, Vikram, the correlation factor is 0.9865 over the last 30 years. So that is a very high correlation. So I would expect that anything which, any budget, which any provision which makes the economy grow will be positive for the auto industry. Yes, there are some specific points which probably can be taken up. One, of course, is that when we talked about last year coming down from the previous highs, and last year was 18% down, assuming this pandemic period is a unusual and in a unprecedented year. Let's talk of last year itself. The cost of acquisition of vehicle went up substantially for three reasons. First reason was the regulatory conversion on BS4 to BS6, which was done last year, and that added to the cost. Second was there has been over a period of time steep increases in the road taxes, the insurance taxes, the GST itself is quite high. So anything, an Indian consumer, because our GDP per capita is actually quite low. So in PPP terms, it's less than $4,000. So if we are very sensitive to prices, and therefore anything which helps in bringing down the cost of acquisition. So if something like a GST comes down, it's very good. But we do realize that while the industry will be clamoring for that cost reduction in terms of the cost of acquisition, but I know the government of India would have fiscal constraints. They have to look at other side, also the other industries. We are talking only of auto industry. They also have to look at the social sector. They have to take care of a lot of other investments in the general economy. So while the industry probably would welcome anything which will reduce the cost of acquisition, but I'm not so sure whether it's possible given the constraint. But one thing which is possible, and I think quite practical to do, is to bring in the scrappage policy, which means that the older vehicles or the less efficient vehicles or the more polluting vehicles can be off the road. That can be a spur in the demand for new cars because the old vehicles will be off the road. It will also save a lot of fuel for the country because these vehicles are more fuel efficient than newer ones, and the newer vehicles will therefore consume much less oil. So those are the sort of things which we expect. We also expect that the hybrid vehicles will be given some sort of a support, as was done earlier, because that is definitely the way towards electrification for the future. So I think some of these off the box, out of the box sort of ideas should also work, including, for example, giving the interest paid on car loans to be deducted from income tax calculation. That's also a possibility. But anything basically to bring the cost of acquisition down, I think would be very good for the industry.
So obviously, Balbir, if I turn to you next, that you were just referring to that especially in the luxury segment, the amount of taxes is very high and it contributes very significantly to the cost of one of those vehicles. I'm not sure whether you're expecting that this is going to be the budget where she will actually reduce that, right? Because obviously this will be one budget where they'll say that we have a lot of constraints, we have to spend money, we have to worry about health, we have to do other stuff. So conversely, are you fearing that this would be one of the first places where they may come out with more taxes? In fact, the luxury, the rich can afford it, so increase the taxes out here rather than reduce it.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think the way I would want to answer you is, I think most important for us is a stable policy regime. What is happening is from time to time, there are newer and newer regulations that are coming. And, the luxury segment are overall requirement of the time for making any change in our product pipeline is between 9 to 12 months. So what we expect and request government is to give us a long-term policy so that we can follow the same and we can decide which products we got into the country and which products no. That is the first part. Second is, of course, we understand that it's tough time. It may not be possible for the government to reduce the taxes, but there are other ways wherein the demand can be improved. Like most of other cars which our customers do buy, it's a very emotional buying in the luxury space. And if the business is overall, if the sentiment is positive, we will sell more cars. There are also things which are positive, I would say. Let's say, for an example, the rate of interests are one of the lowest at this point in time in the whether it is on the wholesale side, on the retail side. The share market is one of the highest, for many years. So these are there also positive things which we see, and the recovery is also happening quite fast. So if all these, the whole peripheral things are positive, our industry will definitely grow. So my expectation, at least from the government, is that, if you remember when the GST was implemented about 4 years back, cess was kept for 5 years. On a cess, we also luxury segment, almost 22% is cess is what we are paying. So even if once the 5 years are done, if the cess is taken off, or the overall the industry for automotive, if certain actions are taken, let's say depreciation benefits are extended to not just businesses but also the people who are buying cars individually. These are small little things here and there that can also give a spurt to the demand. So I agree. We may not expect too much in terms of reducing the taxation, but if a stable policy regime is the first and the most critical thing for us.
Satyakam, from your point of view, I guess the things like the scrappage policy and others may well be of some benefit. But would you also be looking in your sort of an area in commercial vehicles, some of the other signaling of what is happening? For example, we've been hearing these announcements about the Delhi-Mumbai expressway rolling out. If there's a big infrastructure push on roads, that might also be as good news for you as some of the other things, right? Like cuts in taxation, which, as I'm saying, I'm not sure it's going to happen this time.
Absolutely. You're right, Vikram. And let me give my perspective on the CV industry itself. Well, the CVs are the backbone of the economy, and Shashank rightly pointed out a strong correlation between automobile sales and the state of the economy. Well, from my point of view, I think the government should look at bringing measures to accelerate the recovery of the economy, at the same time to increase the disposable income with the people, because that definitely leads to increase in consumption and therefore increased demand for movement of goods. So I think these are some of the points which definitely should be the flavor of a budget if we are expecting a revival in demand for automobiles. Well, coming to the ask, or like you said, what could impact the CVs? Well, one thing on the taxes side, the other thing is on the policy side. And on the taxes side, we understand that the room to maneuver is quite limited. But I want to come here with a different aspect of taxes. Well, if you put three things together, one is the tax on an automobile. The second is what's the technical maturity of the market or its products. And the third is the income level or per capita income in the country. And if you put these three together, you'll find that over years, while the technical maturity of the products which we produce and sell in India has increased, for example, we have the BS6 emission norms, which are like the Euro 6 or EPA 15 or JP 17 in Japan. The per capita income, we know how India compares to those economies, but the tax levels are the highest. So it definitely has reached a point where the affordability has come down. And that's what you see as a structural thing, which we see in all segments of automobiles. So we are not asking for a tax cut now because we understand the government cannot do it, but we should look at this topic in a more mid to long-term perspective on how do we rationalize the tax structure to bring more demand and keep the affordability of the automobile as it was some years ago. So that's a different aspect, I think, which the government should look at. The scrappage policy will definitely help. And Shashank already pointed out all the merits of doing that. There's another aspect to it, which is very important for India. You know, we have been talking about India being the manufacturing base for exports. In fact, if you look at what we export already from India is just about 2% of global share of automobile industry. So there's a large headroom for us to capture. But are we enough competitive on manufacturing side? I think not. And the scrappage policy also will contribute to that. You know, recycling of steel and other materials, we believe in our estimate would increase the competitiveness by at least 3 to 4%, which is a large number to gain. So apart from all other merits, triggering demand at this point in time and bringing down the pollution of reducing the consumption of oil, I think we should also look at it from another perspective, which is the other benefits which you derive in the sector itself. And then the last one, we are a foreign player. We've invested about 9,500 crores in India. And if we all have to go for a $5 trillion economy, India would need fresh investments. And therefore, our request to government has been, please review the policies and bring them to the global standards that companies like us and other global giants can continue to invest in India and go for the target which we have set for ourselves.
Well, you're hearing the Make in India, and you're hearing talk about Atmanirbhar and the rest of it, and wanting to make India an auto hub. So, any specific policies that you would like to refer to, and we can see if sometimes in a budget you hear policy announcements that are not necessarily to do with just the rupees and paise and the balancing the books of the government. You do hear some policies announced. So, anything which you would be hoping to hear on that front?
Well, something specific, I would just give one example, and there are many others, but due to paucity of time, just one. If someone invests in time window to offset the future profits against the losses made in the past. Europe or Canada, for example, this period is either indefinite or 15 to 20 years, right? And for large investments, especially in sectors which have gone through these kind of economic cycles, you need a longer time to avail that benefit from government. So this is just one example. And we've seen countries like China, Peru, and Portugal, due to COVID, have extended this benefit to all the players who invested in India. So, things like this will definitely, as Balbir also talked about, we need a stabilization on policy, and we need some things, especially in this situation, that we can keep our momentum and confidence to keep investing in India.
Okay, that's interesting. Shashank, if I could just come back to you, like in addition to, as I said, I'm not sure whether they're going to be cutting the taxes on cars right now, but other steps that may well be taken, because we're hearing a lot of talk about the fact that, yes, you do need to follow easier fiscal policies. This is the time to stimulate demand. Government hasn't really gone out, burning a large amount of money through COVID, unlike certain other countries. So maybe there is some headroom out there. Would you be hoping for things like enhancing disposable income in the hands of the consumers? And that for a company like Maruti Suzuki may well have a very major impact if tax slabs are adjusted, if consumers get a little bit more cash in their hands, or for that matter, if the government takes steps like encouraging the banks to lend more, including car loans, and saying we'll take care of your NPAs. Would those sort of factors also have a major impact? Indirect impact, but impact nevertheless.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we mentioned the correlation with the GDP per capita, we are also talking about the disposable income itself also going up. So it is true. And I think one of the panelists, I think Balbir ji mentioned that disposable income growth would help in fueling the growth in the auto, as also in any other sector as well. So I think clearly such things like, for example, in our auto industries, in passenger vehicles, 80% of the retail happens through finance. So obviously, if something is done on that front, and I had suggested earlier that if those interest payments are sort of deductible for income tax calculation for individuals, or the depreciation benefits of buying the car, I think Balbir mentioned that as well. Those things will obviously fuel the car demand, not just the scrappage policy. So disposable income definitely should help, and especially when you talk about the entry-level segment, which has been badly affected with the cost of acquisition going up, largely on account of not just material cost increase, but also because of insurance taxes, road taxes. You have, of course, the regulatory new regulations coming up for BS4, BS6, and so on. And in fact, some are coming up in the next few years. So I think the government has to take a holistic view of that and see that the overall, it's not just about stimulating the current demand, but to look at the long-term view, as auto industry is a very important part of our economy. It contributes almost 15-16% of the GST collection and about 7-8% of the total GDP itself. So I think we need to have that sort of an outlook in terms of policy making, both on the tax front as also on the front of trying to help in terms of the disposable income growth itself for the consumers in general.
But your sense of that, because I suspect especially in a segment like yours, in the luxury segment, it would be even more acute, right? That if they make it easy to get car loans or give some concessions against that, encourage banks to lend more, infuse liquidity specifically for the purposes of buying big durables, accelerated depreciation. These are simple steps that may well be announced that could actually have a very major impact on you as well.
Absolutely. So all these things definitely give a boost because all of us in automotive segment are known for selling a large number of cars in the month of September and March. This was primarily because for many years we had these depreciation benefits for luxury customers, which primarily is coming from the business community. They do take this benefit when their books are positive, when they have profits in their books. They tend to buy the assets wherein they can have depreciation benefits. But if you see last 3-4 years, this has actually almost this phenomena doesn't exist anymore. We are selling the cars throughout the year. So if any such boost comes, it definitely helps. And no doubt, rate of interests are also helping because not only do they help our customers to own cars at a low rate of interest, but also our dealer partners, because the whole chain is very important. The whole ecosystem of retailing is very important. Our dealership profitability is a key, and if they're able to borrow at a cheaper rates from banks and easily available, the money is easily available. It also helps them push sales. So I think the whole ecosystem is dependent. It's a cross functionality dependence on each other. Anything that gives a positive movement definitely helps. So not just on automotive side, for me personally, I would say in the luxury space, if the rate of interests are lower for our business community, if they're able to enhance their business, if they want to grow their business, they will automatically buy the cars. And at the end of the day, I always say, we sell emotions. Car is a byproduct. So if overall there is a positivity, if the whole country is moving positively, if the GDP is growing of the country, cars will sell automatically. People already own cars and they move from non-luxury segment to luxury segment. So basically they're upgrading themselves. So, anything that helps the whole chain definitely gives us a boost.
All right, I'm just going to turn now to one other issue which may well surface in the budget, but even if it doesn't, it's clearly going to be one of the priorities of the government, which is the entire question about changing technologies, right? Electric vehicles. There's so much talk about that. The possibility, Tesla could be coming into India at some point. There's talk about alternate fuels. There's obviously deepening concern about the levels of air pollution, especially in North India and in the NCR. Do you think this is going to be the year where the government is going to take decisive efforts to try and push electric vehicles? And is that something that all of you are factoring into your calculations? Satyakam, why don't I start off with you? The new technologies that are coming, electric vehicles, CNG, is that something which you think there's going to be a big push about? And is that something you're factoring in? We may need to change our technologies radically.
Well, we are definitely factoring that in, and we are hoping that the government will use the budget and its policies later on to bring more focus and impetus to that. But here, I also want to bring a word of caution. We can't toy around with too many technologies. No country has the wherewithal to invest in more than two fuels. We have been using diesel and gasoline in the last years, and the alternative could be maximum two other choices in future. So while electric seems to be covering a lot of automobile segment, but that is not the complete answer. Specifically for CV industry, if you look at long haul segments, which is beyond 500 to 700 kilometers, you need a different technology because the battery technology today, or even expected to be in future, is not sufficient. And there, I think the government should definitely prepare a roadmap with us, with stakeholders who create the distribution infrastructure on what makes sense for India. The need is quite clear. We need to bring down the pollution and we need to reduce our dependence on imported crude oil. But then which are the two alternatives we should look at, which could be the future propulsion system for automobiles?
Well, assuming electric vehicles is one of them, Shashank, let me ask you as the person who's sort of making the vast majority or a large number of the cars that are actually sold in India, how long do you think it's going to be before a majority of the cars zipping around on our roads are actually electric vehicles? And do you think this budget is going to signal a major step in that direction?
Yeah, so I think there is a general agreement in the industry that the long-term future clearly on the emission front alone itself means that there would be a transition to EV. The question is how fast and how quickly it will happen. So I was looking at some of those analyst research reports of 2016-17, where there was a prediction that by 2023-24 everything would be electric. But I think those people have revised their estimates now, and the reason is that generally across the world, the penetration of EV has been just around 2%, except in countries like Netherlands and Norway, where it's pretty large for different reasons. But going forward, I think it all depends on a couple of things, which is actually preventing the spread of EVs at this moment. One is the cost of the battery technology at the moment is extremely high, which makes the cost of the vehicle very high, the cost of acquisition so high that probably it is some sort of a dampener for purchase of EVs. Second is, in our country, the infrastructure.
Interrupt you. Having said that, the battery technology prices are falling and falling at a really fast rate. So if you
absolutely
extrapolate that forward,
I will.
Suddenly you can think something could change.
Yeah. So great point. And I was coming to that. The second thing was, of course, the infrastructure of charging. And third is this range anxiety which consumers have, because if you have bigger batteries for larger range, you have the additional cost. But as you said, that technologically, the battery powertrain costs are expected to come down, whereas the ICE engine, the technology, the powertrain expected to go up. If you take an example of US, for example, $16,000 is the powertrain cost for electric vehicles, whereas it's $9,000 currently for the ICE vehicles. Now, as the stricter emission norms come in, the ICE powertrain cost goes up. At some point of time, they will cross. And that is the point where everything is in favor of EVs. The emission, the running cost. So there is no reason. Now, the question is, when is that point going to be crossed? The general thought, which is now the analysts and research people are saying, is that in India, it would probably be sometime between 2028 and 2030 that we will reach about 10% of the vehicles as EVs. Now, if you look at CAGRs of 6 to 8%, between 2020 to 2030, 70 million cars will be made in India. So if you take 10%, and then maybe about 63, 64 million will be still ICE vehicles. What do you do about these vehicles? Because you have to do something about the emissions that these cars will give. And we believe that one of the ways is to use alternate technologies like CNG, which is so much less polluting. And you have seen extremely good growth in CNG vehicles in the past few years, and government is supporting that. And second is hybrid vehicles, we believe, is the way towards electrification in India. And that is the reason why I mentioned that we would expect in the budget, for example, some support on the hybrid vehicles also, the hybrid technologies, not just EVs, which I still maintain is still practically a few years away.
Yeah, I mean, I guess once new technologies come, you don't know how fast it will happen. I mean, we just look at the market capitalization of Tesla, and everyone sort of scratches their head and said, how is it more than virtually the entire industry put together? And that's, I guess, because people are betting on what is going to happen in the future. Does this, Balbir, concern you more than others? Because, if the Teslas and others of the world do arrive in India, then they're potentially strong competitors to you. Although, of course, the infrastructure and how will they be charged, and where is the superchargers, and can you really take it out of the city? All of those questions will still remain for now.
I think it doesn't worry us, because in the EV space, the more the merrier. As it was also mentioned by Shashank, that infrastructure is the key for the success of electric vehicles. You have to also keep in mind that the penetration of automotive in India is still about, let's say, less than 30 cars per 1,000 people. So there is a massive motorization which is yet to happen. And it's going to be an era of coexistence. So it's not that it's straight away is going to switch to electric vehicles. It's going to take many, many years. And we are cautiously optimistic about this, that we are also going to bring electric cars into India, and we will bring most likely this year itself. But we have to be very careful, because customers do have this range anxiety, and we have to be very careful when we launch these products so that they're successful. Once you have unsuccessful products, then it is difficult to bring them back. So we are very cautiously working on this topic, and looking at anything and everything which helps the customer to take a decision of buying an electric car. So it's going to be a challenging path, I would say, as we move on. And you also, I was speaking with another channel couple of days back. What we have decided is that earlier we were having diesel and petrol cars. Now we have decided after we moved from BS4 to BS6 that we will have petrol and electrified cars. So we have to also keep our whole structure of availability, I would say, lean, because the luxury space is very, very tiny in India. We are less than, as I mentioned, 1% of the overall automotive industry, as compared to, let's say, 5, 6, 7% in similar markets. So there is a massive motorization, first of all, that has to happen. Within overall motorization, automotive, even the luxury space has to grow. Unless you have a certain minimum threshold volume, you cannot produce locally. And we still have import duty, which is between 60 to 100% on these vehicles. And then you have GST, and then you have registration taxes, then you have insurance, and all put together, it becomes, it's a multi-layer tax on tax on tax. That is what it is. And all our customers are very well traveled, including you. I mean, you know how these cars, how expensive these cars are any other part of the world. They're one of the most expensive to run a luxury car is India. So unless that shell is broken and we come out of it and we grow with volume, I mean, if the volume is grown, the tax will automatically grow. But that's not the way it has been so far. And we hope some point in time we break that shell and come out of it, and start looking at volumes generating revenues rather than revenues generating the volumes. That's how it has been. So coming back to the point, we are very optimistic, but at the same time quite cautious about this, what way we approach this topic. But we are happy more players coming in on the electric side.
All right, last thoughts from all of you, and I do this before every budget. Satyakam, perhaps I can start with you. What are the sort of few words that you hope to hear in the budget, and the few words you hope you will not hear?
Well, the few words I hope to hear is that India comes back very quickly to the sustained recovery of economy and comes back to this 8 to 10% corridor, which we touched only for a very short time. What I don't want to hear is increased taxes as a short-term measure to increase revenues by government, because I believe that will be counterproductive to turning the sentiment and also bringing back growth.
Okay, no new taxes. I guess that's what everyone is also hoping for. Shashank, what do you hope to hear, and what do you hope not to hear?
Well, I hope this budget will be one of its kind, which the finance minister has said. It's going to be a really one of its kind budget. Hopefully to bring India back on the high growth path, which should help all industries and also the auto industry. And of course, that's a thought which I always have had for the last 30 years, that there should be no more taxes. It's something which I always hope for, but generally I'm disappointed on that front. So this is the two things which you want: no taxes and prosperous, one of its kind budget which the finance minister promised.
All right, let's see if you're right on that. Balbir, last thoughts from you. What do you hope to hear, not hear?
I think I will echo what my colleagues have mentioned. This is once in lifetime opportunity. This pandemic has, brought us so down below that the only way is up. So I am sure there will be positive measures that government will take to overall move the country upwards. We have a chance to prove ourselves that we are also a great country, and we can do much better than what we have been able to do so far. And of course, no further taxes is what my request is also from the government. I think we are all optimistic. As individual, as Indians, we are always optimistic. We always look at the half glass full. So I would still believe that will happen in this budget as well. And at the end of the day, whatever happens, we will find positivity and we'll carry on with life if we have stable policy regimes.
All right. Well, thank you so much, all of you, for those thoughts. And I'm sure that the government is hearing you loud and clear as to what you're hoping for and what you're hoping will happen and will not happen. So thank you all so much for joining us. Of course, on the 1st of February, we will find out what exactly it is that the finance minister has in time and has in mind in what she is going to actually announce, not just for the economy, but for various sectors, including the auto sector. So thank you all once again. I'd like to thank our guest speaker for taking the time out to share their insights with us, and a big shout out to JK Tyre for partnering with us for this entire series. Signing off for now. Stay well, take care, stay safe.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.